I saw him bolt thousands of times. I've also saw him do some great sets. And also along the way, I got to hang out with him at the bar at the Improv and get to know him uh, some. And so I knew him. And, when Seinfeld started, I did a little cameo in Seinfeld in season 5. So by the time of Curb, uh, it was Jeff, actually. I mean, Larry, of course. I don't know how it went down, but I ran into Jeff, and Curb was brand new at the time, and I just said, "Wow, man, that show's great, and it looks like a lot of fun." He goes, "Well," I go, "Oh, I actually said I would love to do it. What the hell? Might as well throw it out there." He goes, "Yeah, would you really?"
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. It's great to be back. And, this week, actually, the first few weeks I had comedians. And last week I had my two friends, Kyle Secor and Reed Diamond from the show Homicide Life on the Street, because they're just good guys and they are funny. But today we have a very funny comic writer who actually he did my podcast, Cooper Talk, twice when I was in LA, and he did it the first time. And then when he was promoting his documentary, he did it the second time. And when I watched the documentary, I was hoping I was going to be on because they recorded. I was sitting there going, I might be on. And I didn't make it. But of course, he had Larry David and Joy Behar and Jeff Garland. So I can see why I didn't make it. And my guest is Lou DiMaggio. What's up, Lou?
Hey, man, you shouldn't feel bad about that. There's so many people that got cut out. I had no say over the final edit of that, and there were some things. There were like my teacher that I had when I was in college got cut out. I was like, what? I thought that was really a big part of the story. But anyway, there you go.
Well, tell me more about. We're going to talk about your career and your stand-up, and I love hearing stories when you were in New York and in that heyday. But tell the viewers more about your documentary, because it's great. I saw it. It's a great documentary, and I don't know where you can find it now, but I watched it when it came out. But tell them more.
Yeah, I think you can find it on Apple TV and Amazon, I'm pretty sure, and it's like either really cheap or virtually free. So it's called "Where Have You Gone, Lou DiMaggio." And if you're a stand-up fan, especially of that era of the '80s during the boom, it's really kind of great because I got a chance to interview a lot of people that I worked with. Mostly, that was the whole point of it. I mean, sort of the premise is that. Let me just go back a little ways, because what happened was I met a producer friend of mine for lunch, and we were talking about, what's going on. It's one of those expeditions where we're trying to figure out, who's working on what, looking for a gig. And he mentioned that he was doing something with Richard Belzer, some kind of conspiracy show or something like that. And then I just started talking about Belzer because, he was one of my idols growing up in New York, especially in New York comedy. And I told him, eventually I made it all the way up the food chain to Catch a Rising Star, and Belzer was not around much, but he was there. And so we're going back and forth about this, and he's fascinated by the comedy scene, and I'm sort of pitching the idea of, hey, why don't we make a doc about Catch a Rising Star and that whole thing, that world. And he's like, yeah, that would be great. And then, he was sitting on it for a little bit, a couple of days. Then he calls me back and he goes, I got an idea. He goes, what if we do a doc about you um, getting back into stand up and going to consult all your old friends to get advice about what that was? Now, that might sound like it was contrived, but what he really read my mind, because I really did want to do that, at the time. And, probably, I mean, most comedians, when they get like into they've done it, they've been in and out, there comes a time when you want to do it again, but this time you just want to do it because you want to do it,
Well,
without.
I'm doing that
You're
now.
doing
It's
that
funny
now, right?
because I was, I did the same thing. I did it, and I sat there, and when I would visit my now wife, she lived right near a comedy club. I used to work for Andy Scarpati, so he would sit there and
Yeah,
book me.
yeah.
I would come, at the end of the weekend. Then I would do these different gigs, and then when I moved back 7 years ago, this one guy would book me, and I'd have a lot of fun. And now I'm booking this. I do this cool hip room once a month, but there's no pressure, and it's like I'm not driving more than 30 minutes. Like I
Yeah.
sit there, like someone says you want to come out, I'm like I don't want to. But so yeah, so I know because you sit there and you do miss it. Yeah, and it's one of those things you don't. And when you get up and you go through the same thing, you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this again. But then after the buzz leaves of you having a good set, you go, oh fuck it. Yeah, I'm fine. Like watching a ball game instead of traveling like an hour and a half for $10 to do
Well,
10 minutes.
yeah. I mean, I think that's ultimately sort of cuts to what the upshot of it was. I mean, I what was great about the doc was I got what I loved doing it the most was the interviews and reconnecting with these people and the fact that they were willing to do it for me, which was a great, just a great feeling, to get. There's a lot of big names in it, and I was really proud of that. But the part about getting back up there and doing it and doing it in a whole different generation and everything was very interesting. But it it kind of made me feel like, yeah, been there, done that. I mean, it'd be one thing if, Netflix came and said, we love this idea and we think that we'll give you a special and we'll give you 6 months to get it together. And then, in other words, you would enter past where you started at least. I didn't want to have to go back and do it all again, and also, but here's what happened real quickly. After the doc was done, I was continuing to perform because it sort of leaves off with me getting out there and just really, oh, well, I guess he's just going to go out and do it again. And I did. After about, I would say 6 or 7 months, I did a set one night at the Comedy Store in the belly room, and I went up and I just kind of threw all caution to the wind, and I didn't think about what I was going to do, and I just sort of went out and had a great set, and I just walked off feeling like, I think that's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to see if I could still do that. Like I got back to the shape that I was in when I was doing it. Uh, it's like Rocky didn't care about winning the championship. He just wanted to go the distance, and I did that. And I did honestly feel completely fulfilled, and that was it. I didn't. I mean, once a stand up, always a stand up, and however that manifests itself, I write, I post stuff on social media that helps, but going out and doing it, the lifestyle, I'm not interested. So
And I think LA is completely different. Like for me, I mean, I will do shows with a guy, Joe Matarese, who does bigger shows. He's from my hometown, and we get a crowd that is, and on most of my shows, like the one I do at this cool venue, we get a crowd that's like 40 and up, Jewish,
yeah, yeah,
Italian, New Jersey,
right.
Philadelphia. So no one's pretentious. Like in LA, when you're going up to the Comedy Store, you have tourists. You have first of all the young comics who are always on the grind but haven't made a dime, and they sit there and they're judging you. Like they don't know that. Oh, Lou's been on Caroline's Comedy, all those shit. They don't know that because they're out of touch. But it's just weird. But you're right. When you sit there and you get to a certain point, like I go up on stage and I'm nervous, and then I sit there and I go up and I'm like, all right, I have my set, I do well, but I'm the same way. You're sort of like, oh, I'm not gonna come back. But then for me, for some reason, it's once a month. It's a more social and hanging out with the act, like the headliners that I knew from years ago that I didn't see when I lived in LA that whole time.
I think it's probably too, the fact that you can work off that steam because you never stop writing, even if you don't want to. Things come to you. You see something on TV, you're watching the campaign, whatever, and you get all these great thoughts for jokes and stuff. And uh, that's probably a perfect way to get it off. You do it once a month, and you whatever. If you want to try out that new stuff. You're right. It's so different out here. I mean, it's still all about the merry-go-round, and then the other world where people are just sort of quote unquote working stuff out is just that they're what they call them open mic nights, which back in our day was audition nights. But what they are is just for them to get stage time, but they do it in front of each other. Do you know what I mean? It's not even a real audience. And I started going. I was being taken around by a comic who was trying to show me what it's like out there. And I just said, dude, I don't even understand why you do this. It's like, what is the point? You might as well just stand in front of a mirror with a hairbrush and just practice because this is just bizarro. And everybody's looking at their phones. It's like, I actually did it. I went up and I was like, man, okay, yeah, because I was not intimidated by any scenario I could be placed in because I had already done stand up for many years. And but I was just like, damn, what am I doing? I don't want to come back and get into this world. It doesn't make any sense, you know?
Now, what got you into stand up? Because as I said, you were like in the day, and I remember and I don't know if you remember this, but you told me a story on, I think, the first time you were on Cooper Talk about there was so much comedy on TV. You said you were like sitting at your friend's apartment and like emceeing a show, and between acts, and like even if the improv was on, and the guy on the TV was the guy in the club performing. Like you told me
Yes.
that's how much was
Well,
saturated.
that was
But
that
so
was
what?
towards the end of the boom. I was emceeing at Catch a Rising Star. I had moved to LA, but I came back and I had a friend that lived right around the corner. So I literally could go. I could bring up an act and go hang out in his apartment. It was that close, and have a smoke or whatever. And I literally turned on the TV, and the guy that I had just brought up on stage was on the show. And I'm like, well, I guess it's over now. It's got to be over, because surely you don't need to go out and spend money if that's the case, right? So that was quite a revelation. But that was like in 89-ish, probably.
So when did you start? Where? No, you're from. Are you from Long Island, or where are you from?
I'm from Long Island originally, yeah. My family was all Queens people, but I was raised out there, and then I ended up going back, and then I eventually moved into the Manhattan as well. But yeah, I started out there, which was very interesting. Uh, there, there was always that peripheral scene around New York and Philly. You guys had your peripheral gigs, right, around like the one nighters and stuff. So before the East Side Comedy Club opened on Long Island, there was a place called Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn. Did you ever hear of that place? Did you know about it?
No, no. I know. I
Uh,
remember the White House Junction in Central Jersey that Jerry Stanley booked, but I don't
oh,
know
no, no,
the
no.
Richard.
This is a bizarre. This could be a movie, because what happened was Richard M. Dixon, the guy that used to impersonate Nixon. I don't know if you remember this guy, but
Yeah.
he was like ubiquitous when Nixon was president. He had really looked like him, enough that he could pass for him. And I remember as a kid when I was in high school, I went to see Alice Cooper, and there was a moment in the show where he like murders Nixon, and it's this guy. So long story short, obviously, when Nixon resigns and is over, this guy's over too, right? So I guess maybe he had a few shekels saved up, and he opened this little tavern, restaurant, bar in Hicksville, Long Island, and it was called Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn, and it was just like a showcase club, and singers would be there. And when I first decided that I wanted to get up, because they used to advertise on the radio and stuff, that was the place that I chose, because it was close by, and it was the most obvious choice. And I went up there, and amazingly, I had a really good set, because I took it really seriously, and I woodshedded, and I learned a lot of timing from other professionals like Pryor, and I'm listening to records for 3 days, and I'm writing, and you don't know what you're doing, but I wrote down enough material, really, that it was way more than 5 minutes. It was like 20 minutes, and it went over really well, which was not good, because it made me think that I was great. But still, it wasn't a bad way to start off, So of course, I had to relearn stuff when people would heckle me or whatever. But to be honest, I was pretty good at it from the jump, because I had a little bit of stage experience in school. Like, I'd done a couple of plays and stuff, so I wasn't being on stage wasn't an issue for me. It was more about learning how to do the right material and do crowd work and things like that. But the great thing about Dixon's, as opposed to the showcase clubs in New York, was that from the get, from day one, I had stage time, like crazy amounts of stage time. And I developed very quickly. Like, within, less than a year, I had enough material that I could go and do the gigs. And I was making, the $60 with the free hamburger, and I was on my way. And so then I got a little bit more smart and ambitious, and realized, yeah, the showcase clubs are kind of constrictive, but you got to get in there, because if you want to be seen by real, agents and bookers and all that stuff, that's where they go. So I went on that odyssey, and I did eventually. I passed auditions at the Improv, and I ended up doing all the clubs in New York, and I ultimately ended up at Catch as a Catch MC, and I did get a lot of opportunities out of working in those clubs.
Now, when you were starting out and when you were hitting the New York scene, okay, who were some of the comics? And was there like a ton of comics? I know I started in Philly in '88, and like the open mic, we only had like 25 comics. Like now there's like thousands, but it was like we the Comedy Works and the Comedy Factory outlet, and then and so you get up on Wednesday and Thursday night, and you would always get up and maybe in front, and people came to the shows. Now it may have been in front of, if you won the Comedy Factory out, you picked out of the hat. That's why a lot of us got jobs at the door, because then you got slotted in a good spot.
Yeah,
Comedy Works would just thing you, but we had stage time to get, and then another guy opened a club that you could do open mics. But there wasn't, as I said, there wasn't a lot of us, and only like maybe 12 of us were serious about it. The other ones were just fucking around. But for you, when you were starting, when you were going, well, did any of the guys that you were with at Dixon's follow you into the city, or was that like completely like those guys just hung? Like who were
that's
some
a
of those
really yeah, that's interesting because most of those guys were content to stay out there. And of course, there were those guys that probably knew of, the Magnificent Seven, the Long Island guys, Bob Nelson, Rob
Bobby
Bartlett,
Woods?
yeah,
Bob
all
Woods.
those
I remember
guys,
I was
who I worked with all at Dixon's. Um, and so, and those guys could sort of pierce that system in there and get on at those clubs, but they had their own things going, and they didn't see it the same way. Except for, I think it was Don McHenry was a guy that sort of we buddied up and went to New York, because to audition at the Improv in those days, they only did it once a month, and it was on a Sunday night. But they opened the door at, like, I think it was like 8 o'clock in the morning to give out numbers. So we were like, I think I went and crashed at his place that night. We had to really get up for this thing, and we did it. And we got there and we got our numbers, and then we hung out in the city all day. So it was a big, big kind of effort to do that audition. Um, and so that's how it started for me. And I think we both passed, I think, but then then you basically, it was like an apprentice program. That just meant that you passed audition. Now you got to hang around, and then you got to figure out all that, all the machinations of how you're going to get on. And if you when you do start getting on, you get on really late. And it's kind of weird for acts that are already working, because we were both working. We could both get gigs and stuff. So I kind of figured out a way to just, I did all my gigs on the weekends, and there was no way you're going to get weekend spots when you first get into those clubs. So it kind of worked out. And then sooner or later, I started to assimilate into the club and became a regular. But it takes time.
now as a young comic, when you were hanging out in New York, because they always say you have to hang out late. Were you really observing comics? Because I think now, like as I said, when I worked at the Comedy Factory outlet, we also got to see like Tim Allen and Bobby Collins and Dom and these guys who just they knew what they were doing, man. They were headliners,
Yeah.
and we would observe and you would soak it in, and they would talk to you, and you'd be like, oh wow. But now, were you like who were you watching? Were you observing acts, or were you one of those guys who you really didn't hang out in the room when you were finally starting to hang out in the city before you were getting any good spots?
No, it's funny. It's an interesting point, because I did, yeah, because there was a whole other world going on there that we weren't really exposed to. Like you'd see, Rick Overton would go on stage with Gilbert Gottfried, and they would improvise, and it was incredible, and they would do sound effects and all this stuff, and um, there was a whole other world of acts that you weren't exposed to, and of course, every once in a while, celebrities would come in too. Robin might come in, or somebody like that. So it's a different ball game altogether. And you say, and it could, but there are some very provincial acts that would go, "I'm better than that guy. I kill on the road." And I'm like thinking, yeah, but that's not the future, unless that's what you want to do. So I wanted to be in film and television, and I wanted to do other things as well. And that was the only place you were going to get seen for that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, and I also became friends with a lot of people like that I knew of uh, by name or by reputation. And I all of a sudden, after a while, I'm hanging out with them. I couldn't believe it. It was a journey fulfilled.
Who are some of those people? Who were some of those people?
That would have been like, acts that I had seen come out to the island and play, you know, like who I became really good friends with, like John Heyman, um, Steve Scrovan, Ken Ober, Colin Quinn, uh, Susie Essman, you know, all those are all my generation. We all kind of hung out together in the clubs in those days. We all kind of came up together. A couple of those people, like I said, like John was already established in New York. And you know, again, I would see him in an island club and I go, well, I don't know, wow, who's that guy? You know, and so it was just one of those things where I'm sure you've been in that position. You turn around and go, I never thought I'd be hanging out with this guy, you know. So, and we're still good friends to this day. You know, we stay in touch. And in fact, I saw Scrovan yesterday at the Dodger Met game.
He did the show 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, because I've had Scroven's been on a bunch of times. Scroven's great. So okay, so you're in New York and you're running around, you know, and you're doing a bunch of sets a night. Now, when does TV start taking hold of you? Because I know you were on MTV, probably MTV, or probably on Evening at the Improv. You were on those shows, right? Which was your first show you did? Do you remember?
The very first TV appearance I ever made was it was a local show called Comedy Tonight, and it was produced by Bill Boggs. Do you remember that? I don't know if that played in Philly even.
Yeah,
Maybe it
I
did.
remember that show. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so that was the first one, and that guy, the other producer, what's his name? Richard Baker. He became the big manager that managed Drew and uh, Tim Allen. You know, he partnered with Rick Messina and they became a huge management company. So that was the first time. And then I may have done, no, I think that was before I even did a commercial. The other thing was I started to get commercials because I had agents would come up to me and say, hey, you want to audition for commercials? And at the time I was like, me? I don't know. Why would, you know, it turned out it was a good time for, you know, for beer commercials and things like that. They were looking for dudes, you know, like me. And that changed my whole world because all of a sudden now I was booking commercials, making money. I could stay home because I didn't like to go on the road. I just wanted to be in the city, you know. Or if I did go on the road, I would want to go someplace that I wanted to go to, uh, or you know, like Chicago or wherever. And by the way, Philadelphia was the very first city that I ever played in at the Comedy Factory outlet. I always had a warm spot for Philly because of that, because that was the first time I ever stepped outside of the New York area and
That
did a road gig.
that club was phenomenal. The way
Yeah, it was
Clay
great.
here, he built it where it was a movie theater. And it's so funny. Scroban brought this up too. And someone else brought it up. Everyone knew it had the saltiest popcorn because Clay would just put like, I can say a drink, but any comic you talk to who played there goes, oh, it was a great club, but holy shit, that popcorn was so salty. So
And we ate
what
it anyway.
commercials did you do? Yeah, of course. What commercials did you do?
Well, the very first one I ever did was a Levi's 501 commercial, which was a kind of a fancy big deal. Um, and then after that, I did a Miller Genuine Draft commercial, which was great because it ran on regular TV and all over sports. So I was starting to make some money. And then after that, I just started booking. I did a lot of them, all different products and big national commercials and stuff, which I kind of took for granted, you know, at the time. Um, but obviously, you know, in the acting world, it's a sweet gig because you work one day, maybe two, and you get paid for a year. You know, if you're lucky. But in those days, broadcast TV, right? That was mostly there was no streaming. There was basic cable was just getting started, so the advertising usage was all directed towards broadcast TV. So there was a lot of money to be made in that world, you know. And I also hoped that it would lead to other things because I wanted to act and be in movies and TV and stuff, you know.
Did
So
did
I got experience too. I was working with really good directors, and it was really exciting.
did the commercials when you were doing them, because as you said, you are making the money. Yeah, there was a lot of money in commercials. Did that take away your hunger for stand up a little bit? Because once again, as you said, you don't want to leave, but there's a thing where if you're sitting there and you know, you're like, I'm gonna go down to do a spot for $60, but then you just got some of that mailbox money. You know, you sit there probably go, I can probably hang in tonight. I mean, was your act still evolving when you were making this money because you were making it from a totally different stream?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think it stopped my progress uh, as far as how many sets I did and all that stuff, because the scene in New York was so great. Like once you worked into it, once you had made it up the past all the hurdles and were a regular, you could work pretty much at will. And I would do like the multiple sets a night, and I loved it. I was like kind of addicted to it. There was though a thing that I did think about. I mean, are you distracting yourself by wanting something else aside from stand up? And I think I was to some degree distracted because I had my eyes on other things as well. And but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really in control of a lot of things in those days in terms of what was going to become of me, as an actor or a comedian. This was right in the middle of just the maelstrom of all of this shit going on at the same time. It was just exciting. So I didn't know. When I
So,
moved to LA, that's when I made the decision. You
well,
know,
what was your act like? Did you do impressions?
I did some, yeah.
Yeah, and you were because I remember you. I think you did like Eric Roberts. No, who were some of the impressions? I remember
I
you
did
did
do
one.
him. Yeah.
You did Eric Roberts, right? Yeah, because I remember I think Joe Matarese said, "Hey, that Lou DiMaggio does a really good Eric Roberts,"
Oh
which is
wow.
funny. I interviewed Eric Roberts for my other podcast, Cooper Talk, and after the show was over, I said, "Dude, I do a good impression of you," and I did it for him and his wife, and I went, "They should fucking die,
Yeah,
Charlie."
yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, that's pretty good." But no, so you did
That's
no.
funny because I had the same experience because I used to do it on stage and him on stage, and there was this guy who was kind of a big BS guy that always kind of talked about how he knew, because there was also these peripheral characters that hung around in the club, the actors, wannabes, this and thaters, and they all wanted to hang with you and stuff because they were sort of hangers on, and everybody used to go to these restaurants and stuff. And I actually saw Mickey Rourke and Eric Roberts one time at Columbus hanging out. But this guy said to me, "I'm totally gonna have Eric come in and see you on stage doing that." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." I didn't even believe him. So one night I'm on stage and I'm doing. "Yeah, they took my thumb, Charlie. They took my, whatever." And I walk off the stage, and there's only one way you could go, and then you'd be at a wall, and then you'd make a left and you go out of the room. But standing at right over there by the mixing board was Eric Roberts, and he looked insane, like he's wearing big rubber boots and shorts, like he just, I don't know, he looked like he just like the fisherman of Gloucester or something. And he looks at me, and I was like, wow, I don't know, because I made him look kind of like an idiot on stage. But he goes to me like this. He goes, "That was fucking great, man. It was great." And I'm like, wow, I think I made him look better than he actually is in real life. He was cool, man. And then he goes, we have to hang out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, okay. And he takes like a pen and he writes his phone number on my hand.
Did you call him?
No, I never called him. I don't know. He seemed a little nuts.
So New York's going great. So
Hmm.
what made your calling to LA? Because I mean, I know everyone goes out there, but you're doing the comedy, and New York is the place to be. I know comedy store, but you can't beat the New York scene back then. It was, the things, and then you were getting the commercials. Did you just decide you wanted to pursue acting? Were you when you decided to move to LA? Did you want to put possibly stand up on the back burner, or what made you decide to go to LA?
Well, it's not that you're putting stand up on the back burner because there's obviously a stand up scene out there, right? And there's also precedents where people are going out there and they're continuing and they're figuring out, okay, I gotta get into the clubs out there, and I did have a little bit of an into the improv because of the improv in New York. I got a couple of recommendations, and sure enough, I did get my chance. Like Bud put me on and all that. But um, that time goes more in hand with what you were talking before about making the decision, or are you distracted? Because in New York, in other words, if you wanted to just pursue stand up purely, New York would have been a better place to stay because you could do it more. It was more creative. The audiences were better. They're real audiences. Once you get to LA, you see, first of all, the stage time is limited. Even if you're getting on a lot, it's nothing compared to what it's like when you're in New York, right? You're getting on 3 to 5 times a night in New York. In LA, if you're hot, out of the gate, you might start out 3, 4, 5 times a week, but after a while, it turns into maybe 2 spots a week. And if you're used to that, it's like a muscle memory feeling. If you're used to working that much, and then all of a sudden you're not, you start to feel off. And then also, to honestly, the audiences were just celebrity hungry. They just wanted to see names. If when they bring up unknown comedians, people were like, "Where's Jay Leno?" I mean, that's maybe an over, uh, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was more like that than it certainly would be in New York. So, long story short, I didn't really enjoy that aspect of it as a stand-up. And meanwhile, I went out there because I got signed with William Morris, and that was a big deal. And of course, you get different advice from different people. Like, don't go out there unless you get a job first. And I just went whole hog and I moved out there. And I got a lot of auditions and I did this and that. Um, but you're the shiny new toy until you're not. And that's what you have to understand when you go out there. Or at least then. I mean, it's probably totally different now, but in those days it was like you want to get in there and you want to strike. Because if you don't, then you're just there and you're now just part of that
Now,
scene, you know.
now, when you got there, did you get any pilot deals or any development deals? Because it seems like that was the time that people were getting development deals. People were just like Jordan Brady told me, like he sat there and he was getting his development deals, and then he was like he was on audition for a Jordan Brady type, but he
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to
yeah.
book the show, and he's like, I couldn't even audition. And he said, they would put you in these holding patterns, but they give you like $50,000 not to do anything. Did you get any of those
I
things
never
going?
I never did that. I kind of entered into it as, strangely enough, almost like I was working already. So it was more like you're getting auditions to try to get shows and stuff like that. There were no holdings or anything like that. I did know a lot of people that did get those deals, and you're right. They were yeah, they were held back. It didn't make any sense. But of course I'm sure I would have taken it because of the money. Um, uh, but yeah, there are horrible stories of people that had development deals, and then ultimately somewhere in the development they were like, yeah, we want to get somebody who's like you but not you, like for real.
I
So
know
it's like
it's
totally
crazy.
destroyed people. So it was really a bad situation in that respect. So in my case, I worked, I did guest spots on shows. I did a couple of, guest spots in some movies, and I continued to do commercials, and I was doing like okay, but was I going out and taking, the town by storm and getting my own show? No, I wasn't. I just became a working actor, comedian there instead of in New York. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. You think you're going to go out there and strike gold, to be honest.
Now, when did you transition to writing? Because you've written for a lot of game shows. What was that whole transition? Because once again, a comic, your mind is always thinking. Like I put jokes on, and you put a lot. I see you put a lot of funny stuff on Facebook and stuff like that. But for me, the Facebook, the Twitter stuff I don't use on stage. I just do it, just because it's, as
Yeah.
you said, you're flexing the muscle and it pops in
Yeah.
your head. But when did you start? Were you? Did people I know you work for Ben Stein's Money and stuff like that, but did people say, hey, you know, Lou should write? How did you go into the writing? Because when you want to act and you want to do stand up, if you're acting, you really don't have the time to write because writing is a full time job. You're going into an office.
Right. Exactly. That's funny. I mean, that was the impetus for me, because what happened was I had reached a point where I wasn't doing a lot of stand up because, and I was actually not. I mean, it wasn't compared to other comedians I was getting on, you know, a lot. What a lot was in LA, which was a couple of times a week. Um, and acting is acting. Sometimes you don't go out for weeks at a time. And I was getting antsy. I was starting to get antsy because then, of course, living in LA, it's not like living in a city like New York or Philly where you go outside and there's a world there. So you have more time to like stew, and you want to be around people. And what happened was, somebody asked me if I wanted to work on. They were doing a reboot of Make Me Laugh, uh, for Comedy Central, and they were also trying to get Ken Ober to host it, and he's a really good friend of mine. So the combination of that and working with him, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I went in to do it, and they made me the head writer. So all of a sudden, I'm in the world where I'm like uh, the head writer of a show, and it's a comedy show. This is all comedians, right? And it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. I did 2 seasons of that, and it kind of filled my life in a way that I needed at the time. I needed to be going somewhere, being with other people, being creatively stimulated. And the guy who was the executive producer of that show, yeah, they're always looking for comedic people who can. That was the trend then, was to make game shows funny. So this new show, Ben Stein, came along, and this guy was going to produce it, and he wanted me to write on it. And the rest is history. Now, we actually, the very first season, we won Emmys for that show. And I left after the first season because it was a grind, but I was proud of the work that everybody did. It was really funny. And yeah, so
Well, I'm looking.
I ended up taking a weird sort of fork in the road there, and I went down that rabbit hole of working on a lot of stuff like that, and that led to, maybe some reality stuff, and they called it an alternative television, but it was like award shows, that kind of thing. Some of it was union, some of it wasn't, most of it wasn't. But somehow I started to at least have some kind of steadiness in my career, which at the time I wanted. And I still continued to do other stuff. I still did stand up. I still acted. Uh, but you reach these crossroads where you're going to have to decide which thing you're going to do.
Well, I'm looking at on your IMDb, and now the singing bee. How do you write comedy for the singing bee? It says you're a head writer. I mean, it's
I
it's
was
a
the head. Was
show.
I
I'm
there?
guessing people. I mean,
Oh, I'll
how?
tell you. No, I'll tell you what you do. And what I did a lot of this. My specialty turned into being a host writer, producer, which I sort of did just naturally with Ober because we were friends. But all of that host chatter, all that host patter, all the stuff that they talk to the contestants with. You sit and you go over that stuff and you give them jokes. You give them options of things that they want to do to make themselves look good and funny. And also, in some cases, you're in their ear, through the IFB. I did that with Jeff Foxworthy on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, which was really fun. Jeff was great to work with, man. He's such a good comedian. Like, he would we got to the point where I would say a word and he knew exactly where I was going, and he would nail some kind of reference. He was really skilled at hosting.
Now you also got to work with Joey Fatone.
Yeah.
Now, what
I
was that
didn't
like? Because it's so funny when you think of them, like, you think like all of these guys when they're in the bands, like a lot of them, if they're in a boy band, it's like I was talking to Steven Weber, the actor, who said when he was in Ballers with The Rock, and he goes, The Rock was automatically going to be a good actor because for years he was on the road, going in these towns, wrestling, which was acting. So for to work with someone like Fatone or these boy band guys, they have the talent because they're in front of screaming fans, not like comics. You get 200, 1,000 if you're lucky, people in the audience, but
Yeah.
you got like thousands. So what was it like working with him? I mean, was he a natural? Did he have the chops when he was hosting?
I think that he definitely had the confidence and the presence for sure. He had to learn, like anybody does. I mean, I don't know. Like I know recently that Travis Kelsey did a reboot of now it's called Are You Smarter Than a Celebrity? I don't know how that went. I'm sure it went fine because it's starting to air soon. But these guys come out of another world, and they just have to learn the nuts and bolts of taking their cues, but they have producers in their ear. They tell them constantly what to do, where to go. I didn't work with Joey in terms of comedy. He kind of had his own thing that he did. He wasn't really trying to be a sort of snappy patter guy. Um, so, uh, but I remember he did a good job. I guess I don't remember the show, to be honest with you.
Now,
But a lot of that stuff is a blur to me because I was just doing one after another.
now I want to get to you and Larry David because how many times have you been on Curb? Because you actually played yourself. You played Lou DiMaggio on Curb.
Well, that's a funny story. I didn't know I was playing myself. I mean, at least I'm playing a guy named Lou DiMaggio because what happened was, they told me well, we want you to play this guy, and he's like, yeah, he's like one of those LA movers and shaker types. He's like he's like a TV producer or a record producer. He's a record producer, he's one of those guys. And the only nod that was ever given to me being a record producer was when Jeff Garland says to me, so, I heard you doing an album with Sarah Jessica Parker. Like, he just says that out of nowhere. And of course, I don't have time to think. I'm going, yeah, yeah, it's going great. So that was the nod to me being that. But the Lou DiMaggio thing came about when they were introducing the investors around the table, right? The people that are going to invest in the restaurant that want to bring Larry in. And again, I think it was Jeff who introduced me as my name. Like no one had ever said, I never even thought, oh, what's my character's name? It just became Lou DiMaggio. So that was that. So I played Lou DiMaggio as Lou DiMaggio.
Well, how did the role come about? Was it Jeff, or did you know Larry in New York, or how did the
Oh
whole
yeah,
role?
yeah, definitely. I had done I knew Larry like from the clubs back in the day.
What was he
Like
like? What was he like back in the clubs?
he was great. You know what he used to do, and this is actually how I got to know him. I was talking to you earlier about working up the food chain, right? And so like at the Improv, the food chain was if they saw that you had potential to be an MC or a regular type act, they wanted to give you some practical experience, and they would put you on late night MC, which meant that when the regular MC was done, then they'd put you on and say, like, see how long you can hold the room. Because, the rooms are open till 4 o'clock. So you'd go on at like 12, whatever, anytime between 12 or 1 or what, and then you just keep going. And you lapped up the opportunity and you did the best you could. But I only tell you this because that meant that I was there pretty much till closing on the nights that I did that. And that's when Larry would come in. He would have his rounds in the city, and he would always hit the Improv last because he lived at Manhattan Tower or Manhattan Plaza, which is right around the block from the Improv. And so I got to know him because he would go on, and all those stories that you've heard about him freaking out with audiences were multiplied by 20 because when he would go on there, these are late night audiences. So there's very rare times that anybody's going to go up there and go, yeah, that was really good. I had a fun time with that crowd. They're all drunk and they're out of it and whatever. So I saw him bolt thousands of times. I've also saw him do some great sets. And also along the way, I got to hang out with him at the bar at the Improv and get to know him uh, some. And so I knew him. And, when Seinfeld started, I did a little cameo in Seinfeld in season 5. So by the time of Curb, uh, it was Jeff, actually. I mean, Larry, of course, I don't know how it went down, but I ran into Jeff, and Curb was brand new at the time. And I just said, wow, man, that show's great. And, it looks like a lot of fun. He goes, well, I go, oh, I actually said I would love to do it. What the hell? Might as well throw it out there. He goes, yeah, would you really? Uh, yeah. Um, so I actually auditioned for the show for the previous season. I ended up being on season 3, but in the previous season there was a role. I went in and I auditioned for it. And auditioning for it is they tell you some stuff about the character.
You cut me out. You cut out.
Should
You,
I
oh,
mute this?
you're good. No, you're back.
I'm back. Okay, sorry. That was Larry. Um, yeah, they give you what you need to know for your character. They tell you what's going on in the scene, and then you improvise. And I was really comfortable with that. I loved it. I took to it very well, and the audition went really well. I didn't get the job. So cut to, I get a phone call about a month later, and I think it was from Jeff, and he said, Larry wants you to do this part on the show. It's like a 4 episode recurring, 5 episode, four, whatever it was. You want roll on this new season? Do you want to do it? Yes, I want to do it. But the idea, like, even though it's like those moments, you don't know what's happening. I auditioned, I didn't get the job, but they just gave me a recurring role on the next season. So that's how I got that. That's how it all came about. And then, once you're in there and once you're doing it, it's sink or swim. You just go. It's fascinating and it's so much fun.
Well, it's all improv, right? Or do you have an outline? Or like, let's say when you go in, like when you sat at the table read, the table for the restaurant. And so what do? They say, okay, here's what we're going to do, Lou. You're going to sit here and Larry's going to start I mean, how do you guys formulate it? Because I know you have to have some kind of outline because there needs to be a starting point and an ending point. Do they just sit there and do take after take? Because I was wondering, since it's directed, do they do a few takes and then they mesh them together? Or how was the shooting? What was the shooting process?
Yeah, all those things. It's very specific in the sense that, yeah, of course, there's an outline. It's written. It's like a sitcom script without the dialogue. So it's like the headings, but the headings are telling the story. So Larry's sitting at the table with the investors. He's trying to decide if he wants to be in or whatever. And basically, you sit down, and in fact, that was the first scene that I ever shot on the show. Um, and he'll say, "Okay, so here's what's happening. I'm coming in. I want to maybe invest, but I'm not sure, and but I'm meeting you all, and that's the first direction, and then you start shooting. You shoot a take, and after that take, he'll give you notes or give notes to everyone and say, okay, that was good. You don't be so deferential to me. Blah 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 blah. I'm not. So you know what I'm saying? He's sort of orchestrating it as he goes along, and they would do. I believe it was like 4 takes per scene. By the time he got to the last one, it was where he wanted it to be. But all the other takes were usable too for other parts. So they just always have this great amount of content and footage that they can pull from when they actually cut the scene. It's incredible.
So your son's a TV star.
Yes,
So
he is.
did you? No, I mean he was on that show, what, American Housewives, for 5 years. Did he come up to you and say, "Dad, I want to be an actor"? I mean, what is it? Because what the business is like, and it's not like a kid taking over the accounting firm that your family has. It's like come in. But what do you ever talk to him about what made him decide to get into acting? Was it because he liked what you did, or he was attracted to her? Because it's cool that he does it, and he's was on a hit TV show.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I mean, it's kind of like it's that proximity thing, right? Like I'm sure I don't know about you, but there was no one in my family that was in show business. I had to chart that course for myself, right? But he grows up with, my wife is also an actor and a writer, uh, and he's just around it, right? So even as a little kid, it would be, oh, your kid's really cute. You think he could be in my short film or whatever, and we would always just go, do you want to do that? And you go, yeah, okay. And so it starts like that, and then it turns into another person who's a friend of ours saying, I want to, I think, I think he's really got something, this kid. So they start, getting him out for commercials. And actually, you know what happened? My wife and I were at a voiceover audition one day, and he was just there along for the ride because he was off from school that day. And the kid agent just happened to walk by and goes, "Is that your kid?" And we're like, "Yeah." He goes, "I want to read him." And we're like, Daniel, you want to read them? You want to, whatever, you just go read a piece of copy. Okay. He comes back, goes, "I want to sign him." 2 weeks later, he booked a national commercial. So that is how it started. And then he just booked a bunch of commercials. Then after that, he got a pilot, which he did, and it didn't go. And then he got Housewives. So it was just this really fast progression. And along the way, my wife and I, it was like a lark until it was like, wait a second, now he's being offered a series. If he gets the series, he's going to be, go. He was 12, so he was like 1 year into middle school, so he was going to be, being taught on set and all that stuff, but it was a big deal. It was a big job, and he was really great, perfect for it, and he was just rolling along at that time. He had really taken to it, and so he did it, and that's where we are. It's now that he's still into it. That's really the answer to your question, is that now, after all that, he still wants to be in the business. He does other things. Uh, I mean, he still works a lot, but it's like he does like a sports podcast with his buddy. He's going to school too on the side. So yeah, it's interesting how it all worked out. It wasn't anything that we ever saw coming, or even um, wanted necessarily, but it just happened. It was just like it couldn't. There was just no way of stopping it. It was one of those things.
Well, what's it like when you go out? Because like I guess all the girls check him out. I mean, it must be weird. Like you think about like the old days, rock stars and actors going everyone's, but like he probably had all these little girls like chasing him. It must be an odd thing to see that when it's your son.
The funny thing is that because the age, he was like 12 to like 16 or 17 when it ended. So there was a certain look, and he used to get recognized, but he used to get recognized more like when we were not in LA, because that show was more of a, like, I one time we went to Boston and people were recognizing him like crazy. But it was the older moms that would be the ones that would want to go, because they, that relationship that he had with his TV mom, Katie Mixon, they just thought it was hilarious. Uh, so I guess my answer is that by now he still does occasionally get recognized, but he's a totally different person now. He's a 21-year-old man now, so they don't always notice that he's that kid, and they always would say the same thing. You're that kid from that show. So
So I want to get back. I want to get back to the documentary. Um, when you read the description on IMDb, it says Lou has to face why he got out of stand up. Like there is some definitive thing. Did you? I mean, was it? Did you just have stage fright? I mean, you said you wanted to get back into it, but I mean, what was it? Because even for me, like I would get, you can call it writer's block, but the shit is funny, but you just don't think it's good enough. And you go on stage, and I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be good, even though it works. That's one of the things that I got over, because for a long time I didn't go on stage. I would go on stage in LA, but then I didn't for a long time because I was just like, I didn't feel funny anymore. I didn't feel
yeah,
it again. So what was there an answer from the documentary on why you stopped doing it? I mean, besides getting the regular life of being a writer and stuff like that, did you ever figure out, was there something mentally that you think you was in your head that you set up by blocks?
yeah. I think that I think that I went. It was such an extreme, right? In the early days, it's like you're on stage all the time, you're doing stand up all the time, and you kind of just can't imagine not doing it, and then all of a sudden you get distracted, uh, necessarily or unnecessarily, but you're not doing it as much, and then you feel it like, I don't know, you're not. It's like an athlete. You get out of shape, and maybe you lose your confidence a little bit. I also had some personal issues I was going through. I had a marriage that was failing, and that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to get into a steady gig. So it was sort of a combination of all those things that got me out of it. And also, honestly, I think it was burnout. I just did it for so long at such an intense level that I really just needed a healthy vacation from it, but it was more like, okay, now you got to do something else to replace that. And it was just not done, I don't think, the right way mentally, but there it is. I mean, I don't regret a single day of it. I'm starting to appreciate it more now than I ever have, in terms of the accomplishment of it and what it takes to do it, and how much more respect I have for people that do it under any circumstances. If you've done it once, I applaud you. At least you had the balls to get up there and do it. So I get that more than I ever did then.
So now what do you want to do? I mean, the thing is, we never leave. Once you're an entertainer, you never leave. It's just a thing. You always find something or an issue. I mean, what are you doing now? I mean, are you keeping the creative void going? I mean, the creative fill going? I mean,
Yeah,
you see what, I mean, are you writing, or what are you doing?
I'm writing. I'm participating in some creative endeavors that aren't necessarily financial. Some experimental film, short film lab things that, because I still like to act and all that too. It's a very, look, the whole business is going through a very drastic transition right now, right? We don't even know where things are going. It's crazy. It's totally dead in Los Angeles. I am assuming in New York as well, and we don't know where it's all headed. It seems like you should really be putting your energies to doing things like this, where you do your own thing, make stuff, for YouTube or whatever, because the uh, the gatekeeper business seems to be, it's like the fall of the Soviet Union or something. I don't know what's happening. So yeah, I try to keep busy creatively, and I write all the time, and and I have some ideas of things that I want to do, but it's kind of a holding pattern right now. There's no sort of flow and like, oh, I got an audition or none of that is happening. So it's sort of like we're all just sort of trying to figure out what the next thing is, what's gonna be happening in our business, you know.
Okay, so this will be posting when this episode airs. It'll be, what's today's date? Today is the
15th.
Okay, so it'll be airing on the 22nd. Now, what's your prediction of the Dodgers Mets? Because I believe the series will be over by that date because you're playing 3 games in a row because you did the 2 and then you're doing tomorrow.
It'll definitely be over by then
Okay.
because
So what do you think? Give your honest prediction.
I'm gonna say, well, what I want to happen is the Mets to take 3 in City and then it's over. But the way that things have been going for them, I really think they're going to have to come back to LA because that's the way they've been doing it. They've been, backs to the wall. So the Mets in 6, maybe 7. It's a tough series. The Dodgers are really good too.
And if the Mets play the Yankees, who are you calling?
The Mets kicked the Yankees' ass in the regular season, 4-0. I honestly think they're a much better team than the Yankees. I really do. I think they'll win.
Right.
I think
Well,
they have
there
better.
you have it.
Yeah.
The
If they get there.
Now the documentary though, people you can go find it. It's good. I've seen it, and it is very good. Were you proud with the final outcome of it? Were you happy with when you watched? Did you sit down and watch it? Like you had a screening? And
yeah.
We
were in film. We had some film festivals. I saw it, in Santa Barbara. The Santa Barbara Film Festival was the first one we got into, which is a really nice, legit film festival. Yeah, it was just trippy though, because it's like, it's your life. It's very personal. So it's very intense to watch in front of an audience, and then after the screening, going up and doing Q&As with the director and stuff. And again, it's not this objective thing where you're talking about some role. You're talking about your own life. So it was very what's the word? I don't even know. In some ways, it was cathartic. In other ways, it was cringy and scary because you bare your soul. What are you going to do? I was very truthful about what I thought and what I believed, and I had to live with that. But a lot of people were very inspired by it. That made them wanted to follow what they wanted to do. So that, of course, is something that sustains you and makes you proud of it. But yeah, the short answer is yes. I was proud of it. I thought it was good. Came off good. There's a lot of great people in it. It's worth seeing if you have any interest in comedy at all.
So people go check it out. Where have you gone, Lou DiMaggio? Very good.
Check it out. Check it out.
Also, people go to YouTube, Comedy Trainwreck. A lot of great shows. You got Coleman Green's got a show, Corey Alexander, Emma Gonical. There's 5 episodes of me up there. Also, you can go to coopertalk.net. I have 1,025 episodes up. I just have my friend Paul Ben Victor, who's a great actor. It's a lot of episodes. And also, if you are a business person in the South Jersey area, go to YouTube, look up the Coop Tank. I moderate 3 local business people. We talk an hour about different things in business, motivation and stuff like that. So go check it all out. I want to thank Jimmy Corham. He's the best producer around. And you guys, I'll talk to you next week. And our guest will be Wendy Liebman, my good friend. So come back, watch us, rate us, subscribe to us. Thank you. Have a good night. And I can't say go Mets or go Dodgers. Fuck them all. Go Phillies.
All right, I understand.
Coop's Comedy Corner.